June 9th, 2024, a date that will be remembered as the beginning of the end. The day Saudi Arabia let a 50-year agreement with the United States expire. No renewal, no extension, no negotiation, just silence. And with that silence, the foundation of American power began to crumble. You didn't see it on the evening news. They buried it, ignored it, pretended it didn't matter, but it matters more than anything that's happened in your lifetime, because that agreement wasn't just a contract between two countries. It was the architecture of global power, the mechanism that allowed America to print unlimited money, wage unlimited wars, accumulate unlimited debt, and force the entire world to pay for it. And now it's over. The petrodollar is dying. And when it dies, everything you know about money, power, and your place in the world, dies with it. They called it the petrodollar system. And if you don't know what that means, you're not alone. They designed it that way, kept it technical, boring, something only economists discuss. But here's what it actually is. It's the reason your dollar is accepted everywhere. The reason America can have 34 trillion in debt and not collapse. The reason the Federal Reserve can print trillions and inflation doesn't immediately destroy the currency. The petrodollar is the invisible hand that's been holding up the American empire for half a century. And Saudi Arabia just let go. To understand what we've lost, you need to understand what we had. And to understand that, we need to go back to the moment when American power was actually vulnerable, when the empire nearly fell, and when one man made a deal that would define the next 50 years, 1971. President Richard Nixon closes the gold window. The dollar is no longer backed by gold. For the first time in history, the world's reserve currency is backed by nothing, just faith. Just the promise that America will remain powerful enough to enforce its value. But faith is fragile. And by 1973, that faith is cracking. The Arab oil embargo, OPEC cuts production, stops selling to America, oil prices quadruple, lines at gas stations stretch for miles, the economy seizes, inflation explodes, and suddenly the world sees American weakness. If Arab countries can hold the US hostage with oil, if they can crater the economy by refusing to sell, then maybe the dollar isn't so powerful after all. Maybe America's dominance is an illusion. Maybe the empire is already dying. But then comes Henry Kissinger, Secretary of State, master strategist, architect of geopolitical power. He sees the crisis not as a problem, but as an opportunity. If oil is power, and OPEC has the oil, then America needs to control OPEC, not through conquest, through alliance, through a deal so beneficial that refusing would be insane. Kissinger travels to Saudi Arabia, meets with the royal family, and he makes an offer. America will provide military protection, the most advanced weapons, security guarantees, defense against all enemies. In exchange, Saudi Arabia agrees to one condition, all oil sales must be denominated in US dollars. Not gold, not Saudi currency, not any other currency, only dollars. And any country that wants to buy Saudi oil must first acquire dollars to pay for it. The Saudis accept. It's the most lopsided deal in history. And it changes everything, because suddenly every country on earth needs dollars, not to buy American goods, to buy oil. The one resource every economy requires: transportation, manufacturing, agriculture, energy, everything runs on oil. And oil only sells $4, which means every country must hold dollar reserves, must trade in dollars, must accept dollars, whether they want to or not. This is the petrodollar system, and it gives America a superpower that no empire in history has ever possessed: the ability to print the world's money. When the Federal Reserve creates dollars, it's not just creating American currency. It's creating the medium of exchange for global energy markets. Every dollar printed is a tax on the entire world, because they need those dollars to survive. And they'll trade real goods, real resources, real labor, for paper that costs America nothing to produce. Think about that. Really think about it. America can print money and exchange it for oil, for manufactured goods, for labor, for anything. And the inflation that normally comes from printing money, it's exported, shared across the entire global economy because everyone holds dollars. Everyone uses dollars. Everyone absorbs the devaluation. It's the most elegant wealth extraction mechanism ever devised. And it's been running for 50 years. The petrodollar doesn't just fund the American lifestyle. It funds American power. Military bases in 130 countries, aircraft carriers patrolling every ocean, wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Syria, all paid for with printed dollars that the world is forced to accept. Because if you want oil, you need dollars. And if you need dollars, you accept American power. It's not a choice. It's the architecture of the system. And for 5 decades, Saudi Arabia upheld their end of the bargain, sold oil only in dollars, convinced other OPEC members to do the same, maintains the system that made America the global hegemon. In exchange, America protected the kingdom, sold them weapons, looked the other way on human rights. On corruption, on financing terrorism, didn't matter. Because Saudi Arabia was the keystone, the linchpin, the one relationship that couldn't be allowed to fail, but empires get arrogant. They forget that power is conditional, that alliances require maintenance, that deals made in strength can be broken in weakness. And America, America started believing its own propaganda, started thinking the dollar was powerful because it deserved to be. Not because it was backed by the petrodollar system, not because Saudi Arabia chose to uphold the agreement, just because inherently, naturally, and that arrogance, that's what killed it. 2014, Russia annexes Crimea. America responds with sanctions, not military action. Economic warfare, freezing Russian dollar assets, cutting Russian banks from the SWIFT system, preventing them from using dollars for international trade, and it works. Devastates the Russian economy, proves that the dollar isn't just money, it's a weapon, and America will use it against anyone who defies them. Every country watching learns a lesson, a terrifying lesson. If you hold dollar reserves, they're not really yours. If you trade in dollars, you're vulnerable. If you depend on the dollar system, America can destroy you with a keystroke without firing a shot, without invading, just by cutting off access to the currency you're forced to use. Would you keep your wealth in a system where a foreign government can confiscate it at will? Would you build your economy on a currency that can be weaponized against you? Because that's what the sanctions revealed. The dollar isn't neutral. It's a tool of American power, and anyone using it is subject to American control. China sees this, Russia sees this, Iran sees this, Saudi Arabia sees this, and they start asking a question. America never thought they'd ask, What if we didn't use dollars? 2015, China launches the cross-border interbank payment system, CIP, an alternative to SWIFT, a way to conduct international transactions without touching the dollar system. It's small at first, limited, but it's growing, and more importantly, it's a signal. China is building infrastructure to escape dollar dominance, and they're inviting others to join. 2080, China and Russia start trading oil in yuan and rubles, not dollars. Direct bilateral trade, cutting America out of the transaction entirely. The volumes are small, but the precedent is massive. If the two largest U.S. adversaries can trade oil without dollars, who else might follow? 2020, the pandemic. America prints $6 trillion in 2 years, the largest monetary expansion in history, and the inflation. It's not just hitting America, it's global, because everyone holds dollars, everyone trades in dollars. Everyone suffers when the Federal Reserve debases the currency, and they're realizing we're paying for American spending, we're absorbing American inflation, we're subsidizing American power, and getting nothing in return except the privilege of continuing to use a currency we don't control. 2022, Russia invades Ukraine. America responds with the most aggressive sanctions in history, not just cutting Russia from SWIFT, freezing $300 billion in Russian central bank reserves. Money Russia held in dollars. In US and European banks, savings from decades of oil exports, stolen, not through war, through executive order. America just reaches into foreign central bank accounts and takes the money because we can, because they're denominated in dollars. because we control the system. And every country holding dollar reserves sees this and thinks, ... we're next. If we do anything America doesn't like, they'll just take our money, our savings, our reserves. Everything we've accumulated through trade and exports and hard work, gone. Because we made the mistake of trusting the dollar system. If you're starting to feel the ground shift beneath your feet, if you're recognizing that maybe American power isn't as permanent as you thought, then you're beginning to understand what's really happening. Hit subscribe now, because what comes next is the collapse, and you need to see it coming before it arrives. 2023, Saudi Arabia and China sign a comprehensive strategic partnership, trade agreements, military cooperation, technology sharing, and buried in the details, ... an agreement to trade oil in yuan, not exclusively, not yet, but optionally. Saudi Arabia will now accept Chinese currency for oil sales. The first crack in the petrodollar system. The first time in 50 years that Saudi oil doesn't require dollars. But it's more than just one deal. It's a signal. Saudi Arabia is hedging, diversifying, preparing for a world where the dollar isn't dominant because they see what's coming. They see America's debt exploding. See the Federal Reserve trapped. See inflation destroying purchasing power. See the weaponization driving countries away. And they're making a calculated decision. The petrodollar system is ending, and we need to be on the winning side when it does. The BRICS nations accelerate their plans. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and 34 other countries interested in joining. They're not just talking about an alternative currency. They're building it a system for international trade that doesn't require dollars backed by gold, by commodities, by real assets instead of debt and military power. And if they succeed, if they create a viable alternative to the dollar, the petrodollar doesn't just weaken, it ends March 2024. Saudi Arabia announces it's considering joining BRICS. The country that upheld the petrodollar for 50 years is now contemplating an alliance explicitly designed to escape dollar dominance. The irony is almost poetic. The nation America relied on to maintain its power is the one walking away, and then June 9th, 2024, the 50-year agreement expires. Saudi Arabia doesn't renew it, doesn't even issue a statement, just ... lets it die quietly. Because there's nothing to say. The world has changed. American power has waned, and the deal that made sense in 1974 makes no sense now. Why commit exclusively to dollars when China is your largest customer? When BRICS offers an alternative, when holding dollars means accepting American control over your sovereignty, the silence is deafening. Because Saudi Arabia isn't just ending an agreement, they're ending an era. The era of unquestioned American financial dominance. The ERA of the era when America could print unlimited money and the world had no choice but to accept it. And the American media, they barely cover it. A few financial outlets mention it in passing, but the mainstream news, nothing. Because acknowledging this would require explaining the petrodollar system. And explaining the petrodollar system would require admitting that American prosperity isn't earned. It's extracted through a monetary arrangement that forces the world to subsidize American consumption. And that's not a conversation they want to have. But the silence doesn't change reality. The petrodollar is dying. And when it dies, the American economy dies with it. Not immediately, not dramatically, but inevitably, slowly, at first, then suddenly, then catastrophically. Here's what happens when the petrodollar collapses. Countries don't need to hold dollar reserves anymore. So they start selling, dumping treasury bonds, converting dollars to other currencies, to yuan, to euros, to gold, to anything that isn't tied to American debt. And as they sell, the value of the dollar falls. Not against commodities, against everything. Your purchasing power evaporates. That inflation you've been feeling for the past few years. That's nothing. That's the preview. When the petrodollar truly dies, when countries stop accepting dollars for oil, when the Federal Reserve can't export inflation anymore, it all comes home. The decades of money printing, the trillions in debt, the decades of living beyond our means, all of it hits at once. and the government can't stop it. Can't print more money because that accelerates the collapse. Can't raise interest rates because the debt is unpayable even at current rates. Can't cut spending because that triggers recession. Can't do anything except watch as the empire unwinds, as the wealth evaporates, as the standard of living falls, as America becomes just another country instead of the indispensable nation. This isn't theory. This isn't speculation. This is mathematics. The petrodollar allowed America to run deficits forever, to import more than it exports, to consume more than it produces. And when that system ends, the imbalance is correct. Violently, painfully, completely, your savings held in dollars, losing value daily, your retirement denominated in dollars, evaporating as purchasing power collapses, your salary paid in dollars, buying less every month because the dollar isn't backed by gold anymore, isn't backed by the petrodollar anymore. It's just ... paper backed by debt and the fading memory of American power. But here's what makes this truly terrifying. America's enemies understand this. They're not attacking with weapons. They're attacking with economics, building alternatives to the dollar, creating parallel financial systems, accumulating gold while America accumulates debt. And when the moment comes, when the dollar's weakness is undeniable, ... they'll strike. Not militarily, financially, refusing dollars, demanding payment in commodities, in gold, in their currencies. And America won't be able to stop them because military power can't defend a currency. Threats can't force countries to accept worthless paper. And one day, world stops accepting dollars ... American power isn't just diminished. It's over. The base is close. The carriers return home. The empire contracts not by choice, by necessity. Because empires require funding, and funding requires a currency people accept. Would you accept dollars if you didn't have to? If there were alternatives, if using dollars meant accepting American control over your economy, your sovereignty, your future, neither would anyone else. And that's why the petrodollar's death is America's death, not as a country, as an empire, as the dominant power, as the exception that didn't need to follow the rules everyone else did. China is ready for this. They've been preparing for decades, accumulating gold, building alternatives, creating SIPs, launching the digital yuan, signing bilateral trade agreements. When the dollar collapses, they don't collapse with it. They rise because they're not dependent on the dollar system. They built their own, and they invited everyone America threatened, sanctioned, or alienated to join them. Russia is ready. They've been forced to prepare by American sanctions, developed payment systems that don't touch dollars, traded with China, India, Iran, and local currencies. Accumulated gold reserves. When the dollar dies, Russia doesn't suffer. They've already been cut off, already adapted, already survived what America thought would destroy them. The BRICS nations are ready. They've been coordinating for years, planning for this moment, building the infrastructure to trade without dollars, to settle in commodities, to create a multipolar world where American financial dominance is just a memory. But America is not ready. The government is not ready. The Federal Reserve is not ready. And you ... you are definitely not ready because you've been told the dollar is safe, that America is indispensable, that the system will continue forever because it always has, but forever ended on June 9th, 2024. You just haven't felt it yet. The collapse is already happening, not in the future. Now, today, every oil trade settled in yuan, every bilateral agreement that excludes dollars, every country diversifying reserves away from treasuries, every central bank buying gold instead of dollars. These aren't separate events. They're dominoes falling, a cascade that started slowly but is accelerating. And when the last domino falls, when Saudi Arabia officially trades oil in multiple currencies, when BRICS launches their alternative, when countries dump treasuries en masse, the collapse becomes visible, undeniable, catastrophic. And here's the cruel irony, ... America did this to itself. The sanctions that seemed so powerful, they showed everyone the system was weaponized, the money printing that funded recovery. It showed everyone the currency was debased. The arrogance that assumed dominance was permanent. It blinded leadership to the rising threats. Every action that seemed to project strength actually revealed weakness. And America's rivals noticed, they learned, and they're using that knowledge to kill the empire without firing a shot. This is how empires die. Not through invasion, through currency collapse. Rome didn't fall to barbarians. It fell when the denarius lost all value. The British Empire didn't end with military defeat. It ended when the pound stopped being the reserve currency. And America is learning the same lesson. That empire isn't about tanks and planes. It's about money. And when the money dies, everything else follows. So what do? How do you protect yourself when the currency you're forced to use is dying? How do you preserve wealth when the system is designed to extract it? How do you survive the collapse of the most powerful empire in history? First, acknowledge reality. The petrodollar is dead. The dollar's dominance is ending. The comfortable lifestyle funded by printed money and global exploitation is unsustainable. Once you stop believing the lies, you can start preparing for the truth. Second, diversify out of dollars, not all at once, not recklessly, but systematically. Hold assets the dollar measures but doesn't control physical gold. Foreign currencies, commodities, real estate, skills, knowledge, relationships, things that maintain value regardless of what happens to paper currency. Third, reduce dependence on systems that require dollar stability, debt, pensions, social security, any promise denominated in dollars and dependent on government solvency. These are traps. They assume the system continues, and when the assumption fails, the promises evaporate. Fourth, understand this isn't America's first crisis. It's potentially the last one. The end of the return to being a normal country with normal constraints. No more printing unlimited money. No more forcing the world to accept our debt. No more living beyond our means while others pay the price. But there's something else. You need to understand something darker. The people running the system. They know this is coming. They've known for years. And they've been preparing not to save you, to save themselves. They're buying hard assets, moving wealth offshore, creating exit strategies while telling you everything is fine, while printing more money while pretending the petrodollar isn't dying. Ask yourself, ... why would they lie? Why would they keep the collapse secret? Because if you knew what they know, ... if you understood how fragile the system is, if you recognized that the petrodollar's death means the end of American prosperity as we know it, you'd panic, you'd act. You would withdraw from the system, and mass panic is the one thing they can't control. So they feed you lies, comforting lies, lies that keep you compliant until it's too late to escape. If this has shaken you, if you're realizing that everything you thought was stable is actually collapsing, ... if you need to understand not just the problem, but the solution, then subscribe right now, because the next episode reveals the end. The digital dollar, central bank digital currencies, total financial control, and how the petrodollar's death isn't the end. It's the transition from one system of control to another, from dollar hegemony to digital surveillance. And what's coming is worse than anything that came before. The petrodollar's dead, Saudi Arabia walked away, and the American empire has begun its final decline. Not in decades, not in years, right now. Today, as you watch this, the question isn't whether it's happening. The question is whether you'll see it coming before it destroys you. Will you prepare, or will you keep believing the lies until your savings evaporate, your standard of living collapses, and your children inherit poverty instead of prosperity? 50 years. That's how long the petrodollar system lasted, from 1974 to 2024. Half a century of American dominance funded by a Saudi agreement that just expired, and with it, ... your future. Unless you act. Unless you prepare. Unless you stop trusting a system designed to fail and start building something that can survive what's coming, the choice is yours. But choose quickly, because the collapse doesn't wait for you to be ready. It's already here. And time is the only resource you can't create more of.